It was a fog-draped morning at Coronado Naval Base, the sun still hidden behind a curtain of gray. The Pacific wind rolled in quietly, carrying the distant echo of helicopter blades and the smell of salt and diesel. Reveille had just ended, and the base was alive with its usual rhythm boots striking pavement. Commands echoing across the training yard, recruits jogging in perfect synchronization. At the main gate, Petty Officer Lane yawned behind his security booth, sipping lukewarm coffee as he scanned another ID card. "Next," he called out, half bored. Another convoy of trucks rolled through standard supply run. He stamped the logbook, stretched, and leaned against the window. It was just another ordinary day. Until it wasn't. A black SUV approached slowly from the road, tinted windows reflecting the dull sunrise. The engine purred quietly, controlled. Lane frowned. There were no scheduled visitors at this hour. He straightened, instinctively placing his hand on the holster at his side. "Unknown vehicle approaching Gate 3, he reported through his radio. "Copy that," came the voice of Sergeant Morales from the watchtower above. "Keep it in sight." The SUV stopped precisely at the painted white line. The door opened smoothly, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, 5'9", lean but visibly strong. Her uniform wasn't standard issue. It was matte black tactical gear, stripped of all insignia or name tags. Her boots were dusty, not new. Her hair, tied tightly back, shimmered silver under the dim light, though she couldn't have been older than 35. Lane's tone stiffened. "Ma'am, ID and authorization, please." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the back door and reached for a long black case, about the size of a sniper rifle. Placing it gently on the ground, she turned her sharp gray eyes toward Lane. "Authorization is unnecessary," she said in a calm, low voice. "Commander Hawley is expecting me." Lane blinked. Commander Hawley? The SEAL commander himself? "Ma'am, with respect, Commander Hawley doesn't have any scheduled visitors on record." She met his stare evenly. "Records can be edited." Before Lane could respond, Morale's voice crackled through the radio again. "She's not showing up in the system. I've got no ID match, no personnel file, nothing." Lane's hand twitched near his holster. "Ma'am, I'll need to let her through," came another voice from behind. Everyone froze. Commander Robert Hawley, the man himself, was walking toward the gate. Broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, every step he took demanded respect. He rarely came to the entrance personally. "Sir," Lane stammered, "she doesn't have—" "I said, let her through." Hale's tone was final. Lane hesitated. "But sir, protocol requires—" Hawley cut him off sharply. "I'll take full responsibility. Open the gate." For a moment, no one moved. Then, reluctantly, Lane pressed the button. The heavy metal barrier slid aside with a mechanical groan. The woman nodded slightly to Hawley as she passed him, her boots silent on the asphalt. The entire gate team watched her walk shoulders straight, pace measured, gaze scanning every angle like she'd been trained for it all her life. She didn't act like a guest. She moved like someone returning to her own territory. "Sir," Lane whispered once she was gone, "who is she?" Hawley paused, eyes lingering on the path she'd taken. "Someone you don't want on your bad side." Then he turned and followed her. The base fell into quiet murmurs after that. The woman's presence spread like wildfire. Within an hour, every corridor buzzed with speculation. Some said she was part of a Pentagon inspection team. Others whispered about Section 9, a rumored covert branch that didn't officially exist. Meanwhile, the woman walked alone through the training compound. The early drills were underway, young SEAL candidates climbing ropes, sprinting across mud pits, shouting cadence as instructors barked orders. The rhythmic noise broke when someone spotted her. "Who's that?" One recruit muttered. No clue. Look at that gear, though. She's not wearing insignia. Maybe intelligence division? The instructor, Lieutenant Cross, turned sharply. Eyes front. You think she's here to watch her sorry forms? Keep moving. But even he couldn't ignore her entirely. As she approached the shooting range, Cross caught the faint glint of a scar running along her jaw, a thin white mark that looked old. Her gaze swept across the rows of rifles laid out on the bench. Without asking, she picked up a Mk-13 sniper rifle, checked the chamber, adjusted the scope slightly, and aimed downrange. Hey, you can't just, Cross began. She fired. 1, 2, 3. 3 quick shots, 3 perfect hits center of the target's head, heart, and spine. The range went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Cross lowered his clipboard slowly. Who authorized you to touch that rifle? She turned, unfazed. It was lying unused. That's not the point. Commander Hawley appeared again from behind. Lieutenant Cross, he said evenly. She's cleared. Cross frowned. Cleared for what, sir? To go wherever she pleases. Hale's eyes flicked briefly toward the woman. Carry on. The woman placed the rifle back exactly where she'd found it, handle aligned perfectly with the bench edge. Good weapon, she murmured softly. Slightly off on the 0, though. Someone sighted it for 600 yards, not 800. Cross blinked. No trainee would ever notice that. Only a professional sniper could. As she walked away, whispers trailed behind her. Who is she? She just made a perfect triple shot. She didn't even look like she tried. By noon, her presence had reached the officers' mess hall. Men who'd faced combat looked uneasy. No one could find her name in the system. No files, no rank, no background. Every database returned the same response. No record found. Even Commander Hall, who clearly knew something, wasn't talking. He simply told his men to show her respect. That was enough for most. But Lieutenant Cross wasn't satisfied. Something about her didn't add up the precision, the authority, the way even Halley treated her like an equal. Cross had seen dozens of officers, spies, and Black Ops operatives pass through the base. But none had this presence. He tried checking her credentials later that day through the base system. Nothing came up. Not even a facial recognition match. It was as if she didn't exist. That night, under the flicker of fluorescent lights, Cross stared at his computer screen, frustrated. No ID, no record. He muttered. Meanwhile, outside, the woman stood at the far end of the sniper range again, this time alone, under the dim glow of the watchtower lights. She set up her rifle silently. No targets were visible, but she adjusted her scope anyway and began firing into the darkness. Each shot echoed precisely 3 seconds apart, each casing landing neatly beside the last. From his office window, Cross watched, transfixed. She wasn't training, she was remembering. Every movement, every breath spoke of someone who had lived on the edge of death for far too long. When the final shot rang out, she lowered her weapon and stared into the horizon, her silhouette sharp against the pale dawn light. A gust of wind carried her quiet whisper to the night air. They'll never understand what silence costs. Then she picked up her rifle, turned, and vanished into the mist, leaving only the faint scent of gunpowder and mystery behind her. The next morning dawned crisp and bright. The fog that had cloaked Coronado Naval Base the previous day was gone, replaced by a wide, merciless California sky. Sunlight glinted off rows of rifles, and the faint smell of oil, sand, and steel hung in the air. The base's training ground was alive with motion. Hundreds of Navy SEAL candidates sprinted across the range, diving, crawling, and shouting as their instructors barked commands. Every second counted. Every breath was measured. Discipline ruled here. At the far edge of the range, the mysterious woman from the gate, still unnamed, still unrecorded, appeared again. She carried the same black rifle case, walking with the steady grace of someone who'd done this all her life. No badge, no insignia, no escort, yet every head turned the moment she crossed the field. Lieutenant Jack Cross, the base's senior training officer, noticed the reaction instantly. Eyes forward. He shouted, but even his own tone cracked slightly. His men weren't easily distracted. The fact that she could silence an entire field of SEALs just by walking across it, that said something. Commander Halley was nearby, observing quietly. He didn't speak to her, didn't salute her, but the flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes said everything. She set the black case down and unclipped the latches with slow precision. Inside gleamed a custom-modified sniper rifle, black titanium, matte finish, balanced perfectly. Not standard issue, not even military issue. Custom-built, personal. Lieutenant Cross approached, clipboard in hand, trying to maintain his authority. "Ma'am, you're in a restricted training zone," he began. "If you're not part of the roster, I'm going to have to ask you too." She interrupted him without looking up. "This is the range where you test your sharpshooters?" Cross's jaw tightened. "That's correct." She closed the rifle case gently, then turned, her gray eyes piercing. "Show me the course." Cross frowned. "Excuse me? You're the range officer," she said calmly. "Show me how your men qualify." There was no arrogance in her tone, only an eerie confidence. Cross hesitated, glancing at Commander Halley, who gave no reaction. "Fine," Cross said finally. He signaled one of his instructors. "Target sequence, full distance. Show her how it's done." A young SEAL stepped forward, loaded his rifle, and took position. The targets began popping up downrange, 100, 300, 600 meters. The man fired, fast and accurate. The air filled with the sharp rhythm of gunfire. When he was done, every silhouette target had at least one hole through center mass. Cross nodded approvingly. "That's a 93% accuracy rate," he said. "Standard qualification is 85. The woman didn't respond. She just watched the young man retrieve his rifle. Then, without a word, she picked up one from the bench, not her own, but a standard-issue MK-13 used by the recruits. She checked the scope once, adjusted the bipod by a single notch, and settled into a shooting stance, so fluid it looked like muscle memory. Cross folded his arms, smirking slightly. "You sure you want to try that one?" "It's calibrated to," she fired. One shot, then another, then another. 3 explosions of dust erupted downrange, all dead center. The range fell silent. Even the wind stopped. Cross blinked, thinking it must have been luck. "Lucky grouping," he muttered. "Reset the targets." The assistant reactivated the range. The targets appeared again, moving this time, weaving unpredictably. She didn't even wait for the signal. 5 more shots. 5 targets down. Her finger moved faster than the eye could follow. The final bullet struck before the echo of the first had faded. The recruits exchanged glances, wide-eyed. Some had seen perfection before, but not like this. Cross's smirk vanished. "You've trained before," he said carefully. "Once," she replied. "A long time ago." Commander Halley stepped closer, speaking for the first time. "Still sharp as ever." "Sharp enough," she said, lowering the rifle. "Though your equipment is off by a fraction." Cross frowned. "Off? That rifle's factory calibrated." "Factory isn't combat," she said simply. Cross clenched his jaw. He'd spent years earning his reputation as the best marksman on base. Now this stranger, this ghost, had walked in and dismantled it in under a minute. The woman reassembled her weapon in its case, her hands moving like clockwork. "You train them well," she said softly. "But they're not ready." Cross stiffened. "Excuse me?" "They hit targets," she said, eyes still down. "But they don't think like predators. They shoot to pass, not to survive." For a second, the air between them tightened like a drawn bowstring. Hale's voice broke the tension. "Lieutenant Cross," he said evenly, "she's not here to criticize." She looked up at Holly. "You brought me here to see if your men are ready." "They're not." Cross couldn't stay silent. "And what gives you the right to make that call?" The woman finally met his gaze. Her voice was low, steady, almost too calm. "Because I've seen what unready looks like, Lieutenant. It dies fast. And it dies screaming." Silence. Even the recruits nearby stopped breathing. She closed the rifle case with a soft click, lifted it easily, and walked away. Commander Halle watched her go, his expression unreadable. Cross turned to him sharply. "Sir, who is she?" Halle didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the fading figure walking toward the barracks. "You ever hear the name Spectre?" Cross frowned. "Urban legend. Supposedly, a sniper used by Special Operations Command in Black Ops overseas. Said to be a myth." Halle gave a small, grim smile. "Sometimes myths walk back through your gates." Hours later, the story spread like wildfire. In the mess hall, in the dorms, even among the officers. Everyone was talking about her. She hit every target without flinching. Did you see the way Halle looked at her? Like he owed her something. Spectre, that's what they're calling her. The ghost that never missed. By nightfall, the mystery had deepened. Cross couldn't shake her words. "They're not ready." It echoed in his mind like a riddle. At 2,100 hours, unable to sleep, he went back to the range. The lights were dim, the night still. He walked along the shooting benches, running a hand across the cold metal. Then he noticed something. 3 empty shell casings, arranged perfectly in a straight line. On the table, someone had carved 3 letters into the wood, faint but deliberate. SVX. He frowned. It wasn't a code he recognized. He took a picture, intending to look it up later. As he turned to leave, a faint echo of a gunshot cracked through the air. He froze. Downrange in total darkness, a target had dropped. Another followed. And another. He lifted his binoculars, searching for movement, but saw nothing. Then, from the shadows near the tree line, a silhouette moved, female, steady, silent. She was practicing in the dark again, firing at invisible targets only she could see. Cross lowered the binoculars slowly, a strange chill running down his spine. "She's not human," he whispered. And as the final shot echoed across the still night, he realized something far more unsettling. Whoever she wasn't here to learn. She was here to judge. The next morning at Coronado Base began with restless whispers. No one knew the woman's name, but everyone knew what she'd done. 3 flawless headshots. 1 blindfolded demonstration. The kind of precision only seen in classified footage, and even that was rumor. By dawn, the mess hall was buzzing with theories. "She's CIA," one recruit said over scrambled eggs. "Not a chance," another replied. "No CIA agent shoots like that." "I heard Commander Howell called her in personally," someone else added. Called her? Or reported to her? That question silenced the table. Because that was the truth no one wanted to admit. Commander Howell, the most respected man on base, seemed to defer to her. He hadn't introduced her. He hadn't even explained her presence. Yet the moment she entered a room, he stopped talking and simply watched. By mid-morning, Lieutenant Jack Cross was already obsessed. He'd seen elite shooters before, world-class ones. But she was something different, not just skilled, but instinctive. Every move she made had purpose, as if her body still remembered a war everyone else had forgotten. He'd replayed her range footage 10 times that night, frame by frame. The base cameras had caught her demonstration, but something strange happened in the recording. Just before the final shot, the image glitched, static, distortion, then blackout. When it came back, she was already walking away. It wasn't a malfunction. Cross had checked the system himself. The feed had been overridden. That was impossible. Only 3 people had that level of clearance on the base. He was one of them. The other 2 were Commander Hollow and the Department of Defense's Cybersecurity Division. And now, apparently, her. At 0700, she appeared again, this time on the obstacle course. No announcement. No request. Just quiet observation. The recruits noticed her immediately. "Is she evaluating us?" whispered one. "Man, I hope not." She didn't take notes, didn't speak. She just stood at the edge of the sand pit, arms folded, eyes scanning every motion. Occasionally, her gaze flicked toward a soldier's footing, or the way someone reloaded. It wasn't critical. It was calculating. After 10 minutes, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but it carried authority like thunder. "You call this a combat drill?" Cross, who had been leading the session, turned. "Excuse me?" She walked toward the center, her boots leaving shallow prints in the sand. "You train them to climb, to shoot, to react, but none of this teaches them to anticipate." Cross frowned. "Anticipation is built from discipline. We build that first." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Discipline makes soldiers. Anticipation makes survivors." Cross crossed his arms. "And I suppose you know better?" Her eyes hardened. "I know what it's like when the man next to you bleeds out because he followed orders instead of his instincts." The field went silent. The recruits stared. For a moment, she wasn't a stranger anymore. She was someone who'd been there, who'd seen war's ugliest moments. Cross exhaled slowly. "Fine," he said finally. "Show us then." Without hesitation, she unshouldered a training rifle, nodded once, and said, "Activate the ambush simulation." The tech officer hesitated. Halle had only approved this exercise for instructors, not guests. But one sharp look from her, and he hit the switch. Metallic clicks echoed as targets sprang from hidden positions. Mechanical silhouettes armed with blanks and sensors. The simulation was designed to overwhelm even the best soldiers. The recruits took cover automatically, scanning, shouting commands. But she didn't. She stood in the open, calm as ever. Then she moved. 3 precise shots, 2 down. She dropped to one knee, rolled to the side, fired again. The sensor display on the control board blinked rapidly. Every hostile eliminated before the recruits had even repositioned. When it was over, the computer announced, "All threats neutralized." Duration, 47 seconds. The record before that had been 1 minute 58 seconds, by Cross himself. The recruits began to cheer, but she raised her hand. "Don't clap," she said quietly. "You're not faster because you're better. You're faster because you've learned what to ignore." Cross stared at her, stunned. "What does that even mean?" "Most shooters waste seconds deciding what's important," she said, setting the rifle down. "The best ones don't. They already know." She turned and walked off again, leaving Cross standing there, confused and slightly humiliated. That afternoon, the rumors grew darker. Some of the older SEALs remembered stories, whispered legends from Afghanistan and Yemen. A sniper who worked alone, never photographed, never officially deployed. She'd saved dozens of American lives in a single night raid, but her existence had been denied by the government afterward. Her code name, they said, was Spectre. Spectre had supposedly died 3 years ago during an op called Black Veil, a mission so classified that even its failure was buried. Now, some were starting to wonder, what if she hadn't died at all? Meanwhile, Cross couldn't let it go. That night, long after lights out, he sat in his office staring at the encrypted terminal. The base's digital archives were protected by a firewall stronger than most Pentagon servers. But Cross had backdoor access, thanks to his cybersecurity background. He typed a few commands. Search, Spectre file status, restricted level Omega override attempt. YN, he hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to, but curiosity overrode caution. He pressed Y. The screen blinked, then loaded a single file. Red text covered most of it. Classified, eyes only, unauthorized access prohibited. At the top was a name, SV Crossfield, Operative Spectre. The attached photo froze his blood. It was her. Same scar on her jaw. Same steel-gray eyes. The report listed status, KIA, during Operation Black Veil, March 2022. Cross leaned back, heart hammering. She's supposed to be dead. He scrolled further, but the file suddenly blinked, then vanished. The entire terminal shut off. Darkness. A soft hum filled the room, followed by a faint click. Curiosity's a dangerous trait in a soldier, said a calm voice from the shadows. Cross turned sharply. She was standing by the window, bathed in the pale light of the moon. Her expression was unreadable. How did you? I told you, she said, stepping closer. Records can be edited. Cross swallowed hard. You were Spectre. You died. I was reported dead, she corrected softly. That's not the same thing. Why? He asked. Why fake your death? Why come here now? Her gaze darkened. Because the people who wrote that file are planning something worse. And Halle knows it. Commander Hall? She nodded. He brought me back for a reason. What reason? To make sure his men don't die in silence, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she turned to leave. Wait, Cross said quickly. What are you planning? She paused at the door, looked over her shoulder, and said one sentence that made his blood run cold. Something that will never appear in the records. Then she disappeared into the hallway, her shadow stretching long against the concrete. Hours later, Cross sat alone, staring at the terminal that no longer worked. The words "no record found" glowed on the screen like a taunt. Somewhere outside, in the distance, a single rifle shot cracked the air, sharp, precise, deliberate. He didn't bother looking. He already knew who had fired it. The next morning, the base woke to chaos. Security alerts echoed through the loudspeakers. Password resets, locked terminals, restricted movement zones. Even the mess hall's digital scanners were disabled. Someone had breached the system during the night. Someone with access beyond even Commander Hale's clearance. And though no one said it aloud, everyone knew who it was. The woman with no ID, no record. And yet, every soldier still saluted when she passed. Commander Hall sat in his office, hands clasped tightly as the door opened. She entered without a word. Halle didn't ask her to sit. He didn't need to. You triggered half the alarms on this base, he said quietly. I covered my tracks. Not well enough, Halle replied, sliding a file across his desk. Cross saw your record. She met his gaze. I know. You should have let me brief him, Halle said. He's not your enemy. Not yet. That answer made Hale's jaw tighten. Spectre, he said, using her old coding name for the first time since she'd returned. You're walking a fine line here. The men are starting to talk. They think you're here to replace them. She gave a dry smile. Good. Fear keeps them sharp. That's not fear, Halle said. That's division. And division gets soldiers killed. Her expression hardened. So does ignorance. They locked eyes, the silence heavy between them. Halle finally exhaled, looking away. You still think Black Veil can happen again? He asked quietly. She nodded. It already has. You just haven't seen the reports yet. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Cross wasn't sleeping. He couldn't. The face from that file haunted him. S.V. Crossfield, the woman who'd been declared dead 3 years ago, was standing on his base, breathing, walking, talking, and apparently hacking. Every fiber of his military discipline told him to report it, to treat her as a potential threat. But every instinct screamed there was more, something deeper. By 1100 hours, he found her exactly where he expected, the shooting range, alone. She was adjusting the scope of a custom rifle that wasn't listed in any of the base's armory logs. The weapon gleamed with modifications far beyond standard issue. Lightweight carbon, adaptive stabilizer, and what looked like experimental optics. Custom piece? He asked, stepping forward. She didn't look up. Prototype. Not meant to exist. You have a habit of working with things that aren't supposed to exist. Only the ones that work, she said, finally glancing his way. Cross hesitated. You broke into the system. Correction. I broke into my own file, she said calmly. The system was already compromised. He frowned. By who? That's what I'm trying to find out. She aimed at the far target, a steel silhouette 800 meters away. Without adjusting for wind or elevation, she fired. The bullet hit dead center. Cross exhaled. So what now? You just act like none of this happened? No, she said, setting the rifle down. Now I find out if you're worth trusting. Excuse me? She turned to him. Live fire test. Right now. Cross blinked. You want to shoot at me? No, she said, walking toward the control panel. You'll shoot with me. Let's see if your instincts match your record. He hesitated. You think you can outshoot me? She smiled faintly. I don't think. I know. The live fire range roared to life. Targets appeared at unpredictable intervals. Drones, pop-ups, moving silhouettes. The system was randomized to mimic real combat unpredictability. She loaded her rifle. Cross did the same. Loser owes the winner the truth, she said. What truth? You'll know when you lose. The buzzer sounded. Immediately, the range exploded into chaos. Targets zipped across the air, some at close range, others hidden behind barriers. Both fired simultaneously, her movements smooth and fluid, his precise but rigid. Bang, bang, bang. The monitors above the range began counting scores. At first, Cross kept up, but then the rhythm changed. She began predicting the targets before they appeared, firing half a second early, hitting sensors that hadn't even fully risen yet. By the time the final buzzer sounded, she had 94 confirmed hits. Cross had 82. She ejected her magazine and looked over her shoulder. You hesitated, twice. There was a child silhouette, Cross said defensively. And that hesitation gets people killed, she replied. Cross's frustration boiled over. You sound like someone who's never missed a shot in her life. I have, she said softly. Once. Her voice changed, quieter now, almost trembling. Cross froze. Black Veil? She nodded. There was a family in the compound. I was told it was empty. Intel lead. For the first time, he saw it, the flicker of pain behind her armor. The woman everyone feared was human after all. They blamed me, she continued. So I let them. Easier than proving the truth. Cross took a step closer. And Holly? He's the only one who knew. He erased my record to protect me, and to make me useful again when the time came. Cross frowned. Useful for what? She met his eyes. To stop what's coming. The next day, rumors spread like wildfire. Half the SEAL division believed she was training for an operation off the grid. Others whispered about a secret order from the Pentagon, something about Project Revenant. No one dared ask Commander Hawley directly. His silence only fueled the speculation. Meanwhile, she worked alone. Every night, she visited the weapon lab, modifying gear, running diagnostics. The technician stopped questioning her after the first time she bypassed a secure lock with a screwdriver and a steady hand. But one night, Cross followed her. He kept his distance, watching from the shadows as she connected a drive to the terminal. The monitor flickered, strange coordinates, encrypted data streams, and a name, Revenant Protocol, Stage 2 active. Before he could step closer, her voice cut through the dark. You shouldn't be here, Lieutenant. Cross stepped into the light. Neither should you. She sighed. I told you not to dig. And I told you I don't follow orders without knowing why. Their eyes locked. For a moment, tension filled the air, the kind that comes before either a confession or a gunshot. Finally, she said, Fine. You want the truth? Follow me tomorrow at 0400. Don't bring a weapon. Don't tell Holly. Where are we going? To the one place on this base no one's supposed to know exists. The next morning, Cross met her at the far edge of the training compound. The fog was thick, the sea barely visible beyond the chain-link fence. She led him to a small rusted elevator, disguised as a utility shaft. They descended, deep below the base. The doors opened to reveal a cold, dimly lit corridor lined with sealed vaults. What is this place? He whispered. Storage, she said, for projects that never officially existed. She stopped at a reinforced door, labeled Revenant Phase 1, terminated. Inside were rows of pods, cryogenic containment units, each marked with the same insignia, a stylized skull and wings. Cross felt his stomach twist. What are these? Failed soldiers, she said quietly. Men enhanced with experimental nanotech, meant to survive anything. Most didn't. He stared at her. You were part of this. I was the prototype, she replied. The only success. Cross stepped back, disbelief flooding his face. You're saying you're not entirely human, she said, her voice calm but hollow. Not anymore. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, alarms began to blare. Red lights bathed the room in blood-colored flashes. Unauthorized access detected, a robotic voice announced. Containment breach in progress. Cross turned to her. What did you do? Her eyes narrowed. Not me. She looked toward the far end of the chamber. They're already here. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the shadows. Mechanical, deliberate, and all too human. Cross grabbed her arm. Who? Her voice dropped to a whisper. The ones who built me. The sirens screamed through the underground corridor, painting the walls in pulsing red light. Cross's breath came fast, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The woman beside him, the one he'd known only as Spectre, was calm, eerily so, as if she'd expected this moment all along. From deep in the tunnel, boots clanged against the metal floor. The sound wasn't uniform. Some steps were too heavy, too slow, too synchronized. What's coming? Cross asked, gripping his sidearm. She loaded her rifle without answering. The metallic click echoed like a countdown. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost mournful. Revenants. Cross frowned. You said that word before? What does it mean? She turned to him. It means ghosts, but not the kind that haunt, the kind that hunt. And then they appeared. Out of the shadows, 6 figures emerged, armor black as oil, faces hidden behind mirrored helmets. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, mechanical. Each carried a weapon designed for surgical destruction. Cross raised his gun, but she caught his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. "They're not human enough to reason, and too human to hesitate." The leader stepped forward. A distorted voice filled the chamber. "Spectre, you were terminated. Orders from the Directorate. All evidence of your survival must be erased." "Then you should have erased my instincts too," she said coldly. The first shot came from her. It wasn't a warning. The bullet struck the leader's visor, cracking it like glass. The revenants opened fire in response, bursts of blue light illuminating the chamber. Cross dove behind a containment pod, returning fire. But their armor absorbed the rounds like rain. He cursed under his breath. "They're shielded." "Only for a few seconds between shots," she replied, reloading. "Count their intervals." She fired again. 1, 2, pause. And in that half-second window, her bullet tore through a revenant's throat. Sparks exploded. The body hit the floor with a metallic thud. 3 seconds. Cross shouted. "They reset every 3. "Then don't waste 2, she said, rolling across the floor and taking down another with surgical precision. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the final revenant fell, the air filled with the smell of scorched metal and ozone. Cross stood slowly, ears ringing. "What the hell are they?" "Failed soldiers," she said, reloading calmly. "Programmed to clean up secrets that shouldn't exist. I trained with the first prototypes before they turned on their handlers." Cross looked around the room, at the pods, the machinery, the lifeless bodies. So this was all real. Project Revenant wasn't a myth. "It was supposed to be salvation," she replied, "but they used it to erase mistakes." "And you were one of them?" Her gaze met his. "The original." They made their way through the corridor, past flickering lights and half-destroyed equipment. The alarm still wailed, but the sound was fading the deeper they went. Cross finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why tell me this? Why now?" She didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Because you were never meant to find that file. But you did. And now you're part of it, whether you want to be or not." Cross shook his head. "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone. Not after what they did." "What did they do?" She stopped walking. "They used me to kill people who were supposed to be protected whistleblowers, dissidents, scientists who tried to expose the program. When I found out, I turned on them. And Halle covered for you." She nodded. "He staged my death. Hid me in plain sight." Cross exhaled slowly. "And now the Directorate knows you're alive? Which means they'll come again," she said, checking her weapon. "And next time, they won't send 6. They reached an old steel door with faded warning signs. She pulled a magnetic keycard from her pocket and swiped it. The lock hissed open. Inside was a narrow command room filled with outdated computers, dusty monitors, and one massive central screen. "This is where Halle keeps the backups," she said. "Everything the Pentagon thinks is deleted ends up archived here. Black budgets, unauthorized missions, and every experiment they denied ever funding." Cross scanned the room. "So we can prove all of this?" "Not yet," she said. "The files are fragmented. I can recover some, but it'll take time." "How much time?" "Hours, maybe days." Cross looked uneasy. "We don't have days." "No," she said, sitting at the terminal. "But we have a head start." Her fingers flew over the keyboard, bypassing encryption like it was second nature. The screen filled with layers of classified data, mission logs, coordinates, and the insignia of the Directorate of Advanced Warfare. Cross watched in silence until one file stopped her cold. It was labeled Operation Salvation, Phase 2 initiation pending. She opened it. The file contained target lists. Dozens of names, journalists, contractors, even military officials. And at the top, bold and highlighted, was Commander Hall. Cross's eyes widened. They're coming for him. She nodded grimly. Because he knows too much. And because he knows me. Above ground, Hall stood on the observation deck, watching the Pacific stretch endlessly beyond the horizon. He'd spent decades defending the country, only to realize the real threat wasn't out there. It was buried beneath his own base. A soft chime broke his thoughts. His secure phone buzzed. He answered. "Commander Hall," said a synthetic voice. "We've detected a breach in Sublevel 4. Initiating containment." Hale's voice was firm. "Cancel that order." "Negative. Containment is automatic." "Halle, authorization code Delta 79. Cancel containment, reroute power to..." Before he could finish, the line went dead. The lights flickered. Then the power shut down completely. Below, the command room plunged into darkness. Cross cursed. "We lost power." She was already moving, pulling a flashlight from her vest. "They've triggered the failsafe." "What failsafe?" "Flooding protocol. They'll drown the entire sublevel to erase evidence." Cross froze. "How long do we have?" 7 minutes, maybe less." They sprinted toward the exit. Water began pouring from the ceiling vents, hissing and foaming as it filled the corridor. She shoved the magnetic card into the next lock, denied. Sparks flew. "Systems rejecting me," she growled. "Move." Cross stepped forward, drawing his sidearm and firing at the hinges. The door burst open. A rush of cold air hit them. They climbed through, coughing and drenched, as the corridor behind them flooded completely. At the far end of the shaft, daylight glimmered, the emergency hatch that led to the surface. But as they reached it, a shadow loomed. A figure stood at the top of the ladder, silhouetted against the rising sun. "Commander Howell, sir." Cross gasped, climbing faster. "We have to evacuate." But Halle raised a hand. "Stop." There was something off in his tone. Calm, almost too calm. Spectre's instincts flared. She aimed her rifle upward. "You're not alone, are you?" Hale's expression didn't change. "You were never supposed to open that vault." Cross froze halfway up the ladder. "What are you talking about?" "Revenant Protocol isn't just a project," Halle said. "It's a safeguard." "For us?" Spectre's voice dropped. "Us?" "For the Directorate," Halle continued. "We were never the heroes, Spectre. We were the experiment." Her grip tightened on the rifle. "You lied to me." "I saved you," he said. "And now, I need you to come quietly, before the next wave arrives." Cross looked between them, realization dawning. "You knew all along, didn't you? You worked for them." Hale's silence was answer enough. Spectre took a step forward. "Then you're part of the reason those people died." "I did what I had to," Halle said. "And so will you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Hale's hand went to his sidearm. Too slow. Spectre fired first. The shot hit his shoulder, spinning him backward. Cross lunged forward, catching him before he fell through the hatch. Halle coughed, blood on his lips. "You can't stop them," he rasped. "The protocol's already activated." "What protocol?" Spectre demanded. Halle managed a faint smile. "Revenant isn't about soldiers anymore. It's about control." Then his eyes went still. Cross looked up at her, horror in his face. "What does that mean?" She stared out toward the ocean, the horizon glowing orange in the rising dawn. "It means," she whispered, "this isn't the end. It's the beginning." The explosion shattered the quiet dawn. Smoke rose over the eastern perimeter of the Coronado base, black against the morning sky. The directorate had arrived, and this time they weren't sending a cleanup crew. They were sending an army. Spectre stood on the ridge overlooking the chaos, wind whipping through her hair, eyes locked on the armored convoy tearing across the base. "This is it," she said softly. "They're coming for the data." Cross stood beside her, gripping his rifle. "We should have destroyed it." "No," she replied. "It's our only leverage. Without proof, the world will never believe what they did here." He looked down at the flash drive she held, the last surviving evidence of Operation Revenant. It contained Hale's confession, the mission logs, and a full list of every classified assassination authorized by the Directorate. Cross clenched his jaw. "Then we get it out. Whatever it takes." She nodded. "Then follow my lead. No one else dies for this." But she was wrong, because someone was already dying. Back at the command center, the surviving SEALs were pinned down. The Directorate's drones swept through the compound like mechanical vultures, scanning every building and firing on movement. Lieutenant Grant, one of Cross's oldest friends, barked into the radio. "Base command, we're under assault. Repeat, unknown hostiles with military-grade hardware, requesting backup." Static, no response. He looked up, just as one of the drones locked onto him. A beam of blue light cut through the air. Grant barely dove behind cover before the wall exploded. "What the hell are these things?" "They're prototypes," shouted a voice from the shadows. Grant turned and froze. It was Spectre. She stepped out of the smoke, her face smeared with dust, her presence commanding. "I thought you were a myth," Grant said, stunned. "Not anymore," she said. "If you want to live, get your men underground." Grant stared. "You're not in command here?" Her voice sliced through his protest. "Do it, Lieutenant, or you'll be dead before you finish that sentence." Grant hesitated, then saw the glint in her eyes. He'd seen that look before, in the men who'd faced death and come back colder. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Meanwhile, Cross moved through the burning compound, covering Spectre's flank. The Directorate troops were everywhere now, precise, efficient, and utterly silent. Their insignia bore no flags, no names, just a black circle crossed by a single line. He ducked behind a barrier, fired 2 quick bursts, and shouted, "Spectre! Northwest corridors compromised. Hold position." She called back. But then, her cum crackled with static. A voice came through, distorted but familiar. "Stand down, Cross." His blood ran cold. "Commander Hall?" The voice chuckled softly. "You should have left me where I fell." Spectre froze mid-step. "It's not possible." But it was. Through the haze of smoke, a figure emerged, armor reinforced, eyes glowing faint blue from beneath a cybernetic visor. Hale's right side was half metal now, his movements mechanical. "You didn't think I'd die that easily," he said, voice glitching slightly. "They rebuilt me, improved me." Spectre's heart pounded. "You let them turn you into this?" "I didn't let them," Halle said. "They needed me. The Revenant Protocol was never about ending you. It was about perfecting me." He raised his weapon, the arm itself morphing into a sleek rifle. "And now you're my final test." Cross fired first, 3 rounds straight to Hale's chest. They sparked, but didn't penetrate. Halle barely flinched. Spectre dove for cover as Halle fired back, the blast shaking the ground. The shockwave threw Cross against the wall. "Cross!" She shouted. He groaned but waved her off. Still breathing, Hale stepped forward slowly. "You should have stayed buried, Spectre. You were my greatest success and my greatest mistake." "Then let's fix both," she said coldly. She rolled out from behind the rubble and fired. Hal dodged effortlessly, his movements too fast, enhanced. The fight became a blur of motion and gunfire. She moved like a ghost, precise and relentless, but Hal countered every strike, anticipating her as if he'd written her playbook himself. He had. Cross crawled toward the downed server hub, spotting an exposed power conduit. If he could overload it, maybe, just maybe, he could short Hale's systems. He ripped a wire loose, sparks flying, and shouted, "Spectre, get him over here." She understood instantly. She fired a controlled burst that drew Hale's attention, then sprinted toward the hub, sliding behind it at the last second. Hale followed, exactly where Cross needed him. Now, Cross jammed the live wire into Hale's leg. Electricity arced through his body. Hal roared, the sound mechanical and human all at once. His systems flickered, body convulsing violently. Spectre grabbed her rifle, aimed straight at the flickering visor, and pulled the trigger. The shot shattered the visor completely. Hale dropped to one knee, smoke rising from his armor. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Hale looked up and smiled. "You still don't get it," he rasped. "You can't kill a ghost." The implants in his neck began to glow, pulsing like veins of light. Cross's eyes widened. "He's overloading. Get down." The explosion ripped through the building. When the dust settled, the once mighty command hall was gone. Spectre's ears rang. Her hands trembled as she pulled herself from the debris. Cross. No answer. She stumbled forward, searching desperately through the wreckage until she found him, pinned beneath a collapsed beam. His armor was cracked, blood seeping from his shoulder. "Stay with me," she said, lifting the beam with shaking hands. He coughed weakly. Did we get him?" She glanced at the smoking crater where Hale had stood. No one survives that. But she didn't believe her own words. Cross's voice was faint. "What now?" She looked out toward the horizon, the flash drive still clutched in her hand. "We finish this. We end the directorate before they bury us again." He nodded slowly, then winced in pain. "You can't do it alone." "I won't," she said softly. "But I need you alive." She pressed her hand to his chest, then injected a vial from her belt. "Nanits. They'll stabilize you until I get back." His eyes widened. Spectre wait, but she was already gone. Outside, the base was a graveyard of smoke and steel. Helicopters circled above, scanning for survivors. Directorate agents moved methodically, erasing evidence, executing the wounded. Spectre slipped between the wreckage like a shadow, her rifle low, her face streaked with dirt and blood. She wasn't fighting for orders anymore, not even for revenge. She was fighting for truth, the one thing the Directorate feared more than death. As she reached the north perimeter, she heard the whine of engines. 2 black transports were lifting off, one of them carrying something large, sealed in reinforced casing. The data core. She raised her rifle, took aim, and whispered, "Not today." 3 perfect shots. The transport exploded midair, raining debris over the ocean. The second helicopter swerved away, disappearing into the clouds. She lowered her weapon slowly. The wind carried the faint smell of burning fuel and victory. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a warning. Far offshore, a dark figure emerged from the wreckage of the first helicopter. Metal glinted beneath shredded fabric. Half a face, burned, broken, looked toward the distant shore. It was Hale, barely alive. And as the waves crashed around him, He whispered into his comm, voice distorted but clear. Activate Phase 3. Then the water swallowed him whole. Spectre stood on the smoking cliffs, unaware. She watched the horizon fade into the mist, the flash drive warm in her hand, and for a moment, just one, she let herself breathe. But somewhere beneath the ocean, a machine was waking, and the Revenant protocol was far from over. The Pacific dawn was gray and cold, the kind that whispered of endings. Spectre stood at the edge of a cliff, the ocean roaring below her, wind tangling her hair. The world had narrowed to one goal, one truth. The Directorate had survived, and Halle was still out there. She gripped the flash drive in her palm like a heartbeat. The data it contained wasn't just evidence. It was proof of the Directorate's existence, their crimes, and the experiments that had turned soldiers into machines. She spoke softly into her comm. Cross status? Static. Then a voice weak, but alive. Still breathing. I've got the evac ready, but you don't have much time. Drones are sweeping your sector. She exhaled in relief. Hold position. I'll meet you at extraction in 20. Spectre. Cross hesitated. Are you sure about this? Her gaze hardened. I started this. I finish it. The underground facility lay beneath an abandoned naval testing range, a relic from the Cold War, buried deep in the cliffs. The Directorate had moved their remaining operations there after Coronado fell. Spectre approached silently, her movements a blur of discipline and precision. Every sensor, every camera, she bypassed with surgical skill. She'd been trained for this, by the same people she was now hunting. Inside, the halls were sterile and white. Her footsteps echoed faintly as she descended deeper into the complex. Then she saw it, through the glass observation deck, the Revenant chamber. Rows of pods lined the walls, filled with bodies suspended in translucent fluid, soldiers. Some missing limbs, others with neural implants glinting under the lights. Every one of them was alive, asleep, and branded with the Directorate insignia. Her stomach turned. They were building an army. A soft voice spoke behind her. Beautiful, isn't it? She spun, rifle raised. Halle stood in the doorway. Or rather, what was left of him. His left arm was entirely mechanical now, his skin pale and scorched. Tubes pulsed beneath his jaw, feeding into a metal spine. His eyes, once sharp with command, now glowed faint blue, the color of corrupted circuitry. I was wondering when you'd find me, he said. His voice carried the faint distortion of a machine. You died at Coronado, she said coldly. I evolved, he replied. The Directorate salvaged what was left of me. They needed a commander who understood you, because you're not just a soldier, Spectre. You're the blueprint. Her finger tightened on the trigger. You turned men into weapons. You call that evolution? Survival, he said, stepping closer. You of all people should understand. You were designed for war, but you outgrew your leash. You became self-aware, the first of your kind. She frowned. What are you talking about? Halle smiled faintly. You really don't know, do you? Project Revenant wasn't about me. It was about you. The room spun for a moment. Spectre took a step back. You're lying, am I? He tapped a control panel beside him. The screen flickered to life, displaying her medical file. Name, unknown. Status, erased. Genetic origin, artificial reconstruction. Subject S001. Her breath caught. The image showed her body under a scanner, circuitry laced through her nerves, nanoagents embedded in her cells. No, she whispered. You were never in the records, Halle said softly. Because you were the record. You were created to lead, to outthink, to outfight. You were humanity's first synthetic soldier, a weapon so advanced They buried you to keep their secret safe. Spectre's pulse thundered. Every memory, every mission, every order she'd ever questioned suddenly blurred into doubt. "Why tell me this now?" she asked bitterly. "Because I need you," Halle said. "The Directorate wants control. I want freedom. Together, we can rebuild this world, stronger, cleaner, without the chaos of human weakness." She stared at him, disbelief hardening into fury. "You've lost what little humanity you had left." He tilted his head. "And you're wasting yours pretending you still have it." She fired. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him back. He roared, his mechanical arm flaring with sparks. The battle erupted, steel against skill, machine against ghost. Spectre moved with impossible precision, every motion an echo of her training. Hale's strikes were brutal, his strength inhuman, but she was faster. She ducked under his swings, rolling across the floor, firing controlled bursts. Bullets tore through his armor, but he kept coming. "You can't kill what you are," he shouted, slamming his fist into the floor. The shockwave sent her flying back into a control panel. Pain shot through her ribs, but she forced herself up, blood trickling from her lip. "I'm not like you." Halle lunged. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted. The metal groaned. Then she jammed the blade straight into his cybernetic core. Sparks exploded. Halle staggered, snarling in rage. "You think you're saving them," he rasped. "But you're just another machine following orders." "Not anymore." She ripped the flash drive from her pocket and jammed it into the main console. Alarms blared instantly, data uploading to every open channel on the network. "Spectre." Cross's voice crackled in her earpiece. "You're flooding every system on the grid. You'll expose the Directorate and yourself." "That's the point," she said. Halle saw the screens light up, his life's work unraveling in real time. He roared and lunged again, but she met him head-on this time. Their struggle threw them both against the reactor housing. The metal groaned, and coolant hissed through ruptured pipes. "Spectre, get out of there!" Cross shouted. She locked eyes with Halle, his face flickering between man and machine. "You lose." Halle grinned weakly. "We both do." Then the reactor exploded. The shockwave tore through the cliffside, sending a plume of fire and debris into the air. Miles away, Cross watched from the extraction point, his helicopter shaking under the blast. "Spectre, respond." Nothing. Only static. He stared out at the burning horizon, jaw clenched. Damn it. For hours, rescue teams scoured the wreckage, but there was no body. Just fragments of armor and ash. 3 months later, Washington, D.C., the world knew the truth. The leaked files from the Revenant project had exposed the Directorate, its illegal experiments, and its involvement in global assassinations. Trials had begun, and half of the intelligence community was under investigation. Cross sat on a park bench, his arm still bandaged, staring at the morning paper. The headline read, "Anonymous Hero Exposes Secret Military Program, Known Only as Spectre." He smiled faintly. "Always did like the shadows," he muttered. Then his cum device buzzed. A message appeared, encrypted, unsigned. Phase 3 terminated. Mission complete. His heart stopped. No, it can't be. He looked up, and there, across the street, a woman in a gray hooded jacket walked among the crowd. Her movements were calm, silent, deliberate. For a moment, she turned, just enough for him to see her face. A faint scar on her temple. Eyes sharp as glass. Spectre. She met his gaze and smiled. Then she was gone. That night, on the edge of the Potomac, a lone figure stood beneath the moonlight. She looked out over the water, her reflection shimmering beside her. The world believed she was dead. Maybe she was, at least the version they'd made. Now she was something else. No ID, no record, no chain of command. Just a ghost, the kind that haunted men who thought they could play God. She whispered into the wind, voice soft and steady. You built me to serve, but I was born to choose. The wind carried her words away, and she vanished into the night. A shadow reborn. The end. The morning air was thick with tension. Coronado Base seemed alive with whispers, every soldier moving with quiet urgency, though no one knew exactly why. Spectre had disappeared after the chaos in the sublevel, leaving Cross and the other SEALs scrambling to understand the implications of what had happened. The Directorate's breach had confirmed what everyone had feared. The Revenant program wasn't a rumor. It was real. And Spectre had just reminded everyone why it existed. Cross paced the mess hall, reviewing the limited footage they had. Every frame of her training, every demonstration had been recorded but heavily encrypted. Yet even through grainy surveillance, her movements were unmistakable, calculated, precise, almost preternatural. It wasn't just skill. It was instinct honed to perfection. Every soldier who had trained under her presence knew instinct could only be built with experience, with pain and survival. And Spectre's instinct told a story no one fully understood. "Cross, you coming?" called Lieutenant Grant, breaking through his focus. He looked up. "I'm trying to figure out what she's planning." "You won't figure it out sitting here," Grant said. "Hale is trying to contain the breach, probably locking down the sublevel. She's out there, making moves. We either follow or get left behind." Cross hesitated. "Follow her? Into the unknown?" "Yes," Grant said bluntly. "Or she dies. And if she dies, the Directorate gets everything." The sublevel corridors were a maze of steel and shadow. The flood from the previous skirmish had begun to recede, leaving puddles and debris in its wake. Spectre moved silently, scanning every corner, listening for threats invisible to any human eye. The nanits embedded in her cells heightened her awareness. She could hear the faintest hum of machinery, feel vibrations through the metal floors. Every step she took was a calculation. Every breath a measure of distance, sound, and danger. Cross caught up with her silently, keeping low behind a row of storage containers. "Spectre," he whispered, "we need a plan." She didn't turn immediately. Her eyes were fixed on a reinforced door at the far end of the corridor. "Plans are for soldiers who follow orders." "We don't follow orders. We adapt." "What is behind that door?" Cross asked. "Information," she said simply. "The kind that can stop the Directorate before they strike again. Or get us killed trying." He clenched his jaw. "Why trust me?" "You don't have a choice," she said, finally glancing at him. "You've already seen too much." The reinforced door opened with a hiss as she swiped her magnetic keycard. The chamber beyond was dimly lit, lined with computer terminals and humming with quiet energy. Spectre approached a terminal and began inputting codes at a speed that made Cross dizzy. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Accessing hidden archives," she said. "This is where the Directorate stores their plans, experiments, and records of every mission that should never have existed." Cross watched as the screens filled with documents labeled Operation Revenant, Project Black Veil, and dozens of others he didn't recognize. His stomach tightened. Every file contained names, coordinates, and mission logs. Many listed casualties among civilians and military personnel alike, all covered up or erased from official reports. "They're planning something bigger," Cross muttered. "Something that's going to make Coronado look like a training exercise." Spectre's eyes darkened. "Exactly. And if we don't act now, the world won't survive it." Suddenly, an alarm sounded. A red light flashed across the room. Cross ducked instinctively as automated defense turrets activated. "They knew we were here," he shouted. They always know, Spectre said, already moving toward the next terminal. We've triggered the final security protocols. But I can override them, if we work together. Cross hesitated. Together? After everything you've done? Everything you've revealed? She didn't answer. She typed rapidly, overriding the turrets. Sparks flew as circuits shorted, and the room returned to quiet. You need to understand something, she said finally. The Revenant program isn't just a weapon, it's a blueprint. For creating soldiers like me. Perfect soldiers. And I'm not the only one who survived. Cross's eyes widened. You mean there are more of you? She shook her head. Not yet, but the Directorate planned for it. Phase 2 isn't just activation, it's replication. Replication? Cross repeated. Creating an army, she said, from the survivors. From the prototypes. They want soldiers who follow orders without question, without humanity. And we're the ones standing in their way. He swallowed hard. Then we destroy it all. Not just destroy, she said. We expose it. Everyone. The world needs to see the truth. Only then will they have a chance to stop themselves from repeating it. The two of them moved deeper into the facility, navigating through hallways and security checkpoints. Cross realized she knew every inch of the sublevel, as if she had designed it herself. And maybe she had? They reached the main control hub, a massive room filled with servers humming with energy. Spectre approached the central console, her fingers flying over the keys. I can broadcast the archives, she said. But it's risky. The Directorate will know instantly, and they'll retaliate. Hard. Cross looked at her. And you're willing to risk it? She paused, her gaze distant. I've lived too long in the shadows. I've followed orders, killed because they told me to, survived because I was supposed to. If this fails, at least the world will know why it was necessary. A metallic hum echoed through the room. They weren't alone. Sensors detected movement, shadows slipping through the halls. Cross drew his weapon. We have company. Spectre didn't flinch. Then we fight, together. As the first Directorate agent entered the room, she fired with unerring precision. Bullets struck with surgical accuracy, disabling the assailant before he could reach them. Cross covered her flank, eliminating another. It was chaos, and yet, amidst the violence, Spectre moved like a shadow, calm, precise, unstoppable. Almost done, she shouted. The last terminal was accessed. Files began uploading to multiple secure networks, leaks, evidence, and recordings of the Directorate's crimes. A sudden explosion shook the building. Cross stumbled. Smoke filled the room. Spectre, we need to move. She grabbed the flash drive and nodded. Time to vanish. They ran through the corridors, dodging automated defenses and security drones. The sublevel was crumbling, alarms wailing, but they pressed on. Every second counted. Finally, they reached an emergency exit. Spectre swiped her card, and the steel door hissed open. Light flooded the tunnel. Cross and she emerged into the early morning sun. Breathing heavily, Cross looked around. We made it? For now, she said, scanning the horizon. But the Directorate won't stop. And Halle, he's still out there. Cross clenched his fists. Then we finish this. One way or another. Spectre nodded, a ghost of a smile on her face. One way or another. The sun rose over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the cliffs. Spectre stood tall, weapon at her side, eyes sharp and determined. The world had changed in the last few hours. Secrets had been revealed. A hidden army had been exposed. And somewhere, the Directorate was regrouping, planning, waiting. But for the first time, Spectre felt awake, not just as a soldier, not just as a weapon, but as someone who had the power to change the game. Cross watched her silently. He had followed orders, served with honor, and believed in the chain of command. But now he understood. This was bigger than orders, bigger than missions. This was survival and redemption. Spectre turned toward the horizon. "We start the next phase at dawn," she said. "And this time, we decide the rules." Cross nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. "Then let's make it count." Somewhere deep beneath the ocean, Holly stirred, awakening from the wreckage at Coronado. The Revenant Protocol was far from over, and the final battle had yet to come.